Hello, everybody. This is Samuel Heber from Samuel Heber on YouTube, Samuel Heber on Facebook, www.samuelheber.net, and Heber Family Adventures on Instagram. I'm here today with another episode of Inclusion Tube. I'm here to talk with my very good friend, Suzanne Fisher, who runs her own practice for moms and women, which involves yoga and a bunch of other types of healing that is pretty exciting. We're going to learn a bit about that today, and she's going to then lead us in a meditation for all you special need moms out there. Suzanne, can you tell the folks a bit about yourself for those who don't know you?
Yes, absolutely. It's good to see you, Sam. I am Suzanne. I am a mom of three. I have a 12-year-old who just finished sixth grade. I have a 7-year-old now who just finished first grade, and a 6-year-old who just finished kindergarten. So we did a lot of schooling since March, and we're still kind of trying to still keep that same rhythm going at home. So the story for me, how I got through, I guess, or how I'm moving through these Corona after times. I opened a practice on February 28th after working for 4 years in a pretty major healthcare system, Mainline Health, if you've heard of it, in Delaware County around Philadelphia. There I was working for 4 years, primarily working with women who'd gone through significant trauma around and during pregnancy. So, pregnancy related stressors, miscarriage, infertility, being treated in terms of going through the IVF process, through complicated pregnancies and stress related to that, through entering new motherhood or repeated motherhood. I worked with a lot of women who were working with their own kiddos in terms of developmental delays and finding out at first about the diagnosis of autism when their kids were like 12 months, 18 months, and walking them through the early intervention process and just like kind of regulating themselves around their own anxiety around what is this going to mean as a mom, and how can I do this, and just the grief that they were experiencing was a lot of the work I was doing. In that time period, for most women, we experienced some form of trauma in terms of just the trauma of the death of a single life into the birth of being a mom. That's a pretty big one. Whether the child has any special needs or not, whether there's any health concerns or not, it doesn't matter. It's a major, major shift for all of us. So that's where I spent the last 4 or 5 years of my life, is really working with that population pretty closely, working within a very structured American healthcare system with a lot of limitations that it just wasn't working for me anymore to continue working there. So I decided to open my own practice where I can incorporate my own training, yes, as a yoga teacher, and the body-mind approach is really where I hang out. So somatic therapies, EMDR is probably the one I'm using the most right now with people, and that is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Very simply, what that means is you can regulate your nervous system with bilateral movement, rhythmic bilateral left and right movement. So I work with women and then mothers on how to do that for themselves, but then even for their kids too. So I also focus a lot on intergenerational trauma patterns, because we've all inherited trauma from our ancestors, every one of us. And so sometimes some of the stress we're carrying around isn't even stuff we ourselves have gone through, but someone before us went through. So that's come up a lot in terms of this COVID experience, because we know that there was a pandemic in 1918, and even just contemplating what relatives were alive at that time, how did they survive that? How do we work with those strengths now to, again, regulate our nervous system so our immune system stays as healthy as possible? So that is the work I'm doing. I'm working with women in very varied locations: Texas, New York City, in and around Philadelphia. So my clientele now, since I'm working all online, is pretty much all over the place. So so I've been at it since, as I said, February 28th, and that's where I am. So that is my story.
That's quite an amazing practice, Suzanne. It sounds like some of you are very passionate. Can you give us a bit of backstory of why you made this the main focus of all the things psychology related? Did you choose this particular point in a woman's life?
Well, because I went through it myself. I had 3 kids. The first one especially rocked my world in its own unique way. And then I had 2 children very quickly after each other. So within 14 months, I had, I guess, 2 children. So I had my own postpartum struggles, and that is really what kind of led me back to working with women specifically in and around that time period. I've always worked with families and kids for 15 years. I have a master's in social work since '05. So I've always worked with people, but it's always been that I've gravitated towards trauma survivors, and most importantly, women most strength knowledge personally, and then just I feel the most easily able to kind of apply what works for me to keep myself okay. Ventured on to do my own thing where I can structure it in a way that seems more healthy and less long term. I don't really believe that people should be in therapy forever. I think that that's really unfortunate that that happens. I think therapy should be skill based. It should be something that you can start doing as a physical, spiritual practice at home. It's not something that you need some expert to tell you, hey, like this, that, and the other. It's helpful at certain junctures in our life to reach out to someone that can help you in that way, but I'm really an advocate for people healing themselves, and there's lots of tools with the physical body to do, and singing and humming and chanting and all of these kinds of, you know, outside the box approaches that humans have been doing for thousands of years, and now the science is supporting, hey, yes, absolutely, rhythmic left and right movement regulates us out of a fight-flight state where we're thinking in our limbic system, we're thinking with a distressed mind, not our true self. So for myself, it's stuff I have to do, and every human being has to do, especially when we're living in a really interesting, revolutionary, culture unraveling time. So
Thank you, Suzanne. For those of you who have never heard any of that before, can you give us some context of some of the things that work for you? Like, how did you discover spirituality, and how did you discover that worked better than what, say, Western medicine or Western psychology has taught us? How did you make that leap?
yeah, that leap really happened when I met your wife, Gisette, in my yoga teacher training, which was back in 2016. So I went through a pretty intensive year-long training with 8 other women, and it was the power of being in circle with 8 women through a year of our lives. That was one thing that was very important, but it was also, you know, how to learn how to breathe. So we know that exhaling longer than inhaling, for example, also regulates the nervous system. It turns our parasympathetic nervous system on and regulates that fight-flight response. So that was something I learned, for example. I learned how to start applying meditation into like an actual practice that I worked with. You know, when we start to approach meditation, we hear, oh, there's all these scientific health benefits, but nobody really explains what types of meditations there are, how to apply them to different deficiencies or dis-eases within the physical body, like which ones to think about using. So that became kind of the juncture off into that world. Probably one of the most important books at that time was Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anodea Judith. That really, she took all of the Western psychology stuff that I'd been taught, you know, for years in grad school and undergrad and in my work with people, and really lined up, you know, the understanding of the self through the chakra system and how that actually really goes together. So it's not that the science isn't important, which is why my business is Science and Soul. The science is very much important, and psychology has brought us a lot of science and research and information. But the soul of the practice, or, you know, what really works for you and whatever is going on for you, that is also just as important. So when you can marry the two, in my opinion, then you find the middle point, and that is where that started. So yoga teacher training, the women in that circle with me, and that is where it all started. So.
Awesome. So let's dive in a bit into your business. So pretending that I am mom fresh off the table, giving birth, I'm feeling, you know, I'm getting postpartum coming on. I come to Suzanne Fisher. What does that exactly look like? Like, how do you?
Right. So yeah. Well, the first thing is thinking about how to regulate the nervous system back to a stasis, like a healthy place. Giving birth, no matter how well it goes, is a shock to the system. And pretty much every woman I watched, you know, through those 4 or 5 years, it was really 4 years of watching this journey from like, oh, I'm pregnant, through the 9 months through like postpartum all struggled with this transition. And, you know, back many generations ago, we had lots of mentoring women who would support us in that process. And our culture, it doesn't really lend itself to that any longer. We're very individualized. Women should figure it out, but oh, by the way, you need like 700 different things. You need this kind of rocker and this kind of car seat and this kind of this. And you need to be tracking the poops and all the things that the hospital makes you do, the medical system, the science side. And for many women, especially those that went through the NICU experience or went through especially IVF before having babies, they already had some grief and loss that they had to kind of work through just to regulate themselves to then be able to offer themselves fully to their babies. And this is an integral moment in time for children, right? Because we know 0 to 3 is when the nervous system is developing in the child and when that child really needs mirroring from the mom the most. But if you're a mom that's been traumatized and you're in a kind of fight, flight, or a shutdown place, which again is the body's normal response to something major happening, you're going to need some help getting yourself out. And there's lots of tools, and I call them hacks, like body hacks, to like regulate the nervous system so you can be present, be mindful of the relationship between you and your baby, and do all that work and shift their legacy as a baby moving forward at the next generation. Because a lot of us, maybe we didn't have parents that had those skills, that knowledge, those abilities to do that because of their own trauma and their own parents' trauma, and it goes on and on forever. So it's really like, I like to interrupt that and really offer these moms support and just yeah, it's going to be okay. Your child will grow up, it will potty train itself, it will do all these things that we're afraid it's not going to be able to do as a new parent. So just, you know, having 3 kids, I know that, and watching so many women, that's just something I happen to know. But also then the science behind how to take control of your nervous system response here, and how to do that in a like concerted way. I call it the foundations. Like that's like where you need to start. So that's where I start. I always dip into intergenerational trauma questions, like through what I call the geniusgram, which is just simply like, you know, how was your mother's postpartum experience? How was your grandmother's postpartum experience? What was going on, historically speaking? Where were they living? There's so much grief and loss and death that happens in a lot of postpartum periods where a woman would lose their mother at the same time as having a baby. Those kinds of situations happen a lot. And, you know, discord within the relationship between the mother and the father, and how the baby, you know, can, you know, erupt that into a bigger thing. And how to work with that too, just on a systemic level. Those are some of the many topics that we end up working with. So grief and loss and gratitude and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a big topic. And it's certainly a big topic among the special needs community because, as you described, it can be multi-generational mental health issues within the family. Often you hear, and especially in families, the birth was very complicated, like child lost oxygen or was traumatic to the mother in some way, premature. The list goes on and on, as you said. And that's the inclusion community often focuses on autism and other special needs and able body. How does your practice help a mom who, all right, just went through this really rough, you know, experience giving birth, but now finding out that her baby is, you know, handicapped in some way? How would your practice help a mom like that?
Right. So we'd start with foundations. We would start with, you know, first realizing that in order to just move forward and parent this child that you have just as this baby is, however it has been given to you, we have to get you healthy and okay first in your body. And then we need to do some grief rituals around whatever the life was that you were dreaming of for this child. And, you know, coming back to the reality of like, this is the child you actually received, and this is just what it's supposed to be also. So there is some grief there, but there's also, you know, there's always this shift that I see with mothers, because I mean, the bond between mother and child is just so like unspeakable almost. And it's not really a big step, but there is some just holding space for the grief there, having to communicate it to all the different relatives and, you know, friends in their lives. That's a complicated process for a lot of women to navigate. So they have to build a narrative to understand it for themselves, to then be able to communicate with everyone else around them. Grieving healthcare trauma is a major topic of conversation. So I was working within a healthcare system where women were giving birth at the variety of hospitals associated with that healthcare system. And, you know, just hearing about a variety of different experiences from the physicians involved, from the nurses involved. There's certainly some grief and trauma work there a lot of the time is what I see. And so that's usually where I bring in the practice of EMDR with women, where we use rhythmic right and left movement to get to an adaptive understanding of what experience occurred. So we've got to regulate the system. We've got to build distress tolerance and the ability to grieve whatever it was that you were dreaming of that is a shift into some other thing, and then gratitude for what it is. And then if we need to continue to work through any kind of flashbacks or intrusive memories that get in the way of the bonding that goes on with the child as this baby is right in this moment, then we use EMDR. That's usually the approach I take with women. Yeah.
Yeah, so there also is the issue with special need mom and regular moms. Suzanne, I don't have time to listen to rhythms. I have 5 minutes max during my day, and
Yep.
this is a busy world. What would you say to those moms that are like, you want me to take care of myself? Shouldn't that take hours and hours? Like, how long does this actually take for those moms that don't have time to take care of themselves?
Yes, I am one of those people that doesn't have time either. And, you know, prioritizing self-care has to become a matter of survival for women, because when they realize that in order for them to be the parent they need to be for their child, that is the first time usually many women come to this idea of like, oh, like if I want to be the parent that I want to be and I don't want to hurt my child emotionally, we all, again, know the science in terms of the 0 to 3 age range. Oh, I guess I do need to do something for myself to meet this child in the most healthy and adaptive way. So that's first. I will definitely always use logic. But secondly, yes, there's lots of hacks into the physical body that can take less than 2 minutes. It's just remembering to do them is the key. That's like the trick. And then actually doing them for yourself. Even when I myself know all the things I need to be doing to keep myself healthy, I forget to do them. I get busy. The routine changes whenever that happens. I mean, that especially for this population in this time when we lost, you know, the school setting, we lost all of the helpers that were helping us raise our kids and support them in a village setting, because I think most parents need a village. I do anyway. I need not just me to be the parent. I need some other helpers. When we lose all of that, we're kind of even more needing to prioritize our sanity in order to meet this child with whatever distress they're going to be in. So that is, it's both logical and it's also actually when you find the ones that are interesting to you and that you enjoy doing, it has to be sustainable. So it has to be something you actually want to do. That's another piece of it. You know, running on a treadmill in terms of self-care and moving my body, it will be never anything I will do consistently because it's horrible to me. But taking a hike outside or going to a creek and sitting outside, that is sustainable. That is something I must do in order to stay well. And it's something I will do because I enjoy it. So it's always unique for whatever the woman is, like whatever their interests are. So those are the kinds of things, you know, reconnecting with nature where something is bigger than your situation and just keeps being there, like a creek, running water is just always running water. There's nothing else it's doing. It's just running water. And there's something about just using that as a meditation practice. So it really depends on the woman and like what her things are, but I generally have a good way of figuring that out when I meet with people. So it's just my questioning approach, I guess. So
yeah, the big thing I took away there is enjoy your self-care. Don't make it a chore. Because then, like you said, with the treadmill, you're not going to get back. If you don't like the treadmill, you're not going to get back on it most likely.
No, it's horrible.
You end up beating yourself up like, oh, I started, but I always quit my exercising. Like, that's the key, I think, is finding self-care that you enjoy.
It is, and it could be as simple as staring at a candle flame. It doesn't have to be a massive undertaking sitting in the corner in silence for half an hour. Most of us don't have the availability to do that. So it has to be also built into, especially in these after times of Corona times, like You know, finding 2 minutes, or really being strategic about like when before the house wakes up or whenever the house goes to bed. Those are usually the most tired times for moms, especially with the little infants and toddlers and preschool age kids, like 0 to 5 age range. You know, even just going to the bathroom in that age range is really difficult by yourself. So you have to be super strategic and creative. You have to get creative with it. It's not easy. And then, yeah, we beat ourselves up when we don't do the things we know that are helpful. So even just me reminding, like, hey, this thing worked for you before. Can you bring that back? You sometimes do need some help with that part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the other big part is when it comes to beating ourselves up as fathers or mothers, the other huge thing I think that's needed in my experience of being a father for almost 3 years is the need for community, like, and letting go of control of, I'm the mom, I'm supposed to be able to do everything perfectly, like cook a meal, keep the house clean, make sure my children's butts are always clean. Do the latest trend of breastfeeding or like there's always a trend with every aspect of raising a child that we're pressured by our society to keep up with.
Yep. And too, like the messages from our family members, like the mothers of the mothers, like that, you know, when you transition into becoming a mother, your relationship with your own mother changes and shifts. And, you know, sometimes that's a beautiful thing to watch, and sometimes it's super complicated. Mothers-in-law, that was a big topic of conversation for a lot of women in terms of how much do you have to follow, how much do you listen to, how much do you not listen to, how do you communicate your disagreements, all of those kinds of interesting relationships that are birthed from when you do give birth. There's not things you think about initially, but they become major points of either support and your community or not. And it really depends on who you are.
So. Yeah, I think the big thing about community is also finding the right men and women to support you. That it doesn't have to be your in-laws or your own parents, because it does complicate it for a lot of parents who watch their children become parents. They think they have a right to step in and govern because they've done it themselves. But
yeah,
in order for us as parents to step on and do it ourselves, we have to find our own path. But we do need a community sometimes. Like, so how do you find a healthy community to support you as you become a new mom, or become a mom for a second time or third time, or maybe the fourth time? That's the traumatic birth for you. Like, and you're so
exactly. It really depends.
Like, how do you let go of that need to be in control of yourself and your children? Say, girls, I need help. You know,
yeah.
My house at 9. You know?
It's a good question. Well, I always interpret the world through my feelings first. That's just kind of how I function in life. I think some people interpret the world first through their thinking mind, and some through their doing body, their doing self. But for me, it's all the heart, it's all feelings first. So generally, like, I know who those humans are. Like, after I've hung out with them, I'll feel revived, I'll feel inspired, I'll feel creative, I'll feel like I can do this. Versus, you know, kind of the vampires who, when you spend time with them and you are done spending time with them, you feel completely depleted, you're exhausted, you need a nap, like you can't function any longer. So for me, that's how I can assess my women, or my circle of women that I want to be surrounded by, is really like, how do I feel both before I see them, but then after. And so a lot of times, sometimes we're working with, what's your spiritual practice for when you do go spend time with your family? If your family happens to be kind of those emotional vampires that really trigger you in a variety of different ways, are you going in with a plan, a strategy of like, if it gets to this point, I have a way to extricate myself from a situation? So then we have a conversation about boundaries and what's healthy, what's not, and all of that kind of stuff. So to me, it's always like, what's the feeling of the people? Do I feel revived? Am I feeling good afterwards, or not? And, you know, a lot of times the birth process causes a lot of deaths in our life. So we're the death of the single woman any longer, the death of just the two, right? You become 3, or you become 4 or 5, or however many kids you become, your family grows. So there is a death and a grief process of those human beings who might have been very close to us at that stage of life, but now you've transitioned and maybe it's really difficult to maintain a relationship. And so there's a lot of grief that goes on, especially first year postpartum for women, in terms of those losses, of maybe the friends that are still out kind of partying and doing that stage of their life, which is totally cool, but you guys can't align on a time schedule if that's what their lives are looking like and yours are looking different. And for especially when I was working with women who had received this, initial, after going through all the medical testing that they had to go through and having, early intervention come in and assess their child and all of those scary stages of like getting closer to maybe the nugget of the truth that their child needs a little bit more support in a variety of different ways, which is to me a blessing, because when you start early and hey, like your kiddo's going to have trouble like talking, or your kid's going to have trouble vocational, like moving and whatever, when you have support from these people coming into your home, it's a great thing. So when they can embrace that as their community, these people that are working to support them with their kids just uniquely how their kids are, that's who becomes their community. And then always, like, do you have any friends who've journeyed through this experience? And a lot of times my moms have been connected with another mom who's maybe a year, 3 or 5 years ahead of them in this journey. And to me, that's the most important, especially if your kiddo's got some struggles that are really difficult for you to see and to watch. We all get to the point as parents where we have to watch our child struggle. It's the myth of Demeter. It's at some point your child's going to struggle, whether it's like 2, 5, 7, 15, 25, 39. Worked with a lot of women who have kiddos that went through drug addictions and so forth. That's a whole nother experience. So maybe they didn't go through early intervention and have all of those struggles, but your child is going to struggle no matter what. So, building skills around that wound early on, to me, only builds resiliency as a mother. So to me, it's actually a gift if you can conceptualize it that way. And to me, that's the whole point. So, yeah.
And what are some of these skills? Because, in this world, a lot of people's reactions, they want that, quick fix, where it be, postpartum medication, and then they go on the meds, and then they find out they don't like the way the meds make them feel, but they're afraid to come off those meds. That's the first thing Western doctors say is like, oh, let me just describe you, insert big Latin word here. This will make it go away, but you as a woman feel, terrible, but like you don't know where to turn. Like, do the things that you offer in your practice often, are they a good substitute, would you say, for Western medicine? Because I think teaching our mamas like healthy behaviors is a way to change the brain chemistry and help you think in a more positive way. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, so at my last practice, we worked with a few physicians who are supporting women with prescribing. And I have to say, at least in the practice I was working with, even in an American healthcare traditional system, they're very cautious to first start with medications. They were always encouraging first, like working with someone and just, working through the grief of this trauma of becoming a mom or whatever had happened. So I would say it depends on which physician we're talking about. It depends on if, OBGYNs do prescribe psych meds. Thing recommending to you, I would always say first, talk to a really good psychiatrist that specializes in this postpartum period of time, perinatal period of time, because they do support the idea that a lot of mom wants to breastfeed. So the anxiety of taking a psych med that might interrupt breastfeeding, is it worth it? Is the cost benefit analysis worth it? So that's a big question, and the prescriber that you're working with should be someone that really knows this period of time. I was working with very much started in that place first. So it always depends on what mentality in terms of meds. So I never say yay or nay to it. It's totally the mom's body, and they're going to know. And a lot of moms talk to me, they're like, I have such a sensitive body, I can't even take an Advil or a Tylenol. Like, I'm so scared what this medication is going to do. So again, it's like the anxiety of the unknown versus really working on putting energy towards seeing if your body can be regulated with some other stuff first. But always, if after about 6 to 9 months of that, and that's usually honestly like 8 months postpartum seems to be for most women anyway, from what I was seeing pattern wise over and over, really when things like, if they haven't gotten any support and they're just going and putting one foot in front of the other, like that seems to be a breaking place. A lot of times people are weaning off breastfeeding at that point. So that's also, when you wean off of breastfeeding, for most women, that is like causes a bump of anxiety, which isn't something anyone talks about, but definitely something I saw over and over again. So even just the knowledge for them, hey, this is a stage of postpartum. I've seen it over and over and over. Like when I would say that, it was just like, oh, okay, this isn't going to last forever. I'm not going to be anxious forever. Because that's the thing with anxiety. Like you feel it, it's super uncomfortable, and you feel like it will never end. And that's the thing that gets us into a panic disorder and gets us into this constant state of fight flight. So, you know, that's where meditation and realizing nothing lasts forever, everything is going to end. There's just a constant birth, death, rebirth cycle over and over and over in everyone's lives over and over. The death cycle being the most uncomfortable and least preferred, but it's going to happen. So it is nice when you know that the anxiety will end, but you do have to do something to make that happen, especially if you've chronically been in a fight flight state. So I always start with the gut. The gut is the reptile, the original brain is our gut. The gut is connected to the brain via the vagus nerve, which is why I'm just so nerded out on the vagus nerve. And I feel like it is the connection between the body and the mind. The vagus nerve starts in your brainstem, hits every major organ from there. And it really can get us stuck in a fight flight place, or in a complete shutdown, like a really major depressive place as well. So to me, the gut is where I would start. Like, what are you eating? Usually postpartum, we're just trying to stay awake because we're not sleeping. So it's a lot of sugar. It's a lot of the comfort foods. And that stuff is actually the stuff that causes inflammation and causes ongoing agitated nervous system states. So it's usually a holistic change, which feels almost overwhelming when I start to talk to someone postpartum about all of this. So it's, you know, incrementally as the woman can, bringing in this kind of knowledge. So there is no right or wrong with meds. It's really a personal decision, and it should be supported and managed by someone that is really an expert at that stage of life. Women and peripartum, it is a unique combo there. So there's not a lot of psychiatrists that do focus on that period of time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, just research your options and go off your gut.
Yeah.
If your gut says I need meds, look into that. If your gut says I need meditation, try that. That you have that intuition in you, mamas, to know what your body needs in order to be like you. But now let's talk about, you know, the other aspect, I guess, of it is a woman's partner who often are blindsided, because I don't know what goes on in women's circles, but men, we don't talk about things like postpartum.
Don't have them, do you?
I'm sorry, what?
You guys don't have men's circles that I know of, do you? Really?
I've heard of male postpartum. Like we see I've read articles about how like men will be watching their wives or girlfriends going through it, and then they kind of symptomatically like sync up and start feeling it too. And also, I think there is I don't know anything about this type, but I think there's a death for man too. Like, there's no longer the single man. There's no longer just me and my wife. There's me, my wife, and a baby or two, or, you know, whatever your family looks like. So, I mean, that's, I think, a topic for another day, but to focus on what we're talking about, how can, what would you say if, like, a woman brought her husband or boyfriend into a session and be like, Suzanne, explain to him what postpartum is, like, and what I need. Like, he's an idiot.
Yeah. Well, we always, in relationships, especially intimate partnerships, we really need to work with compassion, because generally both parties are trying to do the best they can with the resources they've got. That's always a good starting point. They're also working with their own intergenerational crap. So the dads have inherited whatever their family system has given them. The mom has inherited whatever their family system has given them. So just even thinking about that, I would always start with a little bit of family tree work, just to kind of get an idea of what kind of parenting did you receive? How is this going to impact this relationship now? And then I talk a little bit about the science of the male brain. The male brain changes pretty tremendously postpartum, just like the female brain. So
Mm.
that book specifically is The Male Brain by Luann Brizendine, also a highly recommended. Each chapter is like what happens to the male brain postpartum, what happens when your kid is, a little older. And, even just the differences of parenting, fathering a son versus a daughter. I think that's a different experience for most fathers. And, the helplessness also of the stage of postpartum where mom is feeding maybe all the time and mom is having to do the getting up, and maybe dad is still the traditional, like going to work, leaving the house, and doesn't feel as like connected as they want to feel. So there's a lot of grief and loss certainly in the father's life as well. But I think it gets off track, especially when I hear moms saying, well, I can't trust him. I can't leave this baby with him. I'm like, well, you can do that for the next 18 to 25 years, because it's not sustainable to continue to assume that you are the only one that can do this the way that it needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And that is usually the mind frame that I hear the most. And sometimes too, like if the mom is in charge of the routines, when we're talking about anyone special needs or anyone that needs a little extra support, we get really, these routines have to be just like this, and dad can't do it like this because I'm the one doing it. That kind of speech is always something where I'm kind of interjecting. You're going to burn yourself out. You might be able to do it for a year. You might be able to do it for 5 years, but at some point, like, you're going to need to not do that. Like your husband needs to be able to, or your partner needs to be able to handle this child on his own or her own, and they lose out if they don't get that chance. So this need to be all, whether it's from the family, this message, or from the culture, this message, that's a big one to fight against, and really disrupts relationships in really unfortunate ways. So have to empower the other partner, whoever it is, to give you a break, because you need a break and they need one-on-one time. And your child's brain benefits from a father relationship or, the other partner's relationship in different ways. They might be the more playful partner. At least that's the way it works in my relationship. My husband is much more the get down on the ground and roll around, and like that's actually really important for their brains as well. So it's just, to me, it's just logical. Always, like, the science really indicates that the brain of the child's going to benefit from this. So you have to get over your own belief system that you are the only one that can handle this, because that is not true. So
yeah, I agree. Like, it really comes down to the parents working together. I think what has happened in our, at least in American society, is that we spend so much time, like the dad goes off and works all these hours while mom. But now, since I would say World War II, women have started to really join the workforce. And now there's been this juggling act of who watches the kid, and that's the huge thing. Dads, if you don't know what to do, like, go along your partner and watch what she's doing, like learning the routine that she has. And the other thing is, I think, for moms, is as long as dad's feeding the kid appropriately and the end result is the same, like, don't fuss over how he got there, like how he swallowed.
Yes. And don't criticize either. Like, don't criticize it, because don't you want a break? Like, this is what I don't know. Don't you want to take like some time to yourself? Like, so what? Again, yes, if they didn't get the snack at 2 p.m. and they got it at 4, yes, all of that. So the criticism, usually when we're more critical on our partner, it's because we're uber critical on ourselves. It's usually an offset of that. So also, if you're that critical about those things, that's how raging you are against yourself as a parent too. So you have to really watch that relationship with yourself, which is where meditation comes in, when you quiet yourself enough to listen to all of that noise, which isn't true. And a lot of it, again, back to the vagus nerve, is from a fight flight state of being instead of like your higher brain. Like, and it's, no one benefits that way. And there's so much more resources available if you are a two-parent, or even if you include, in my case, like my in-laws and my parents, and helping parent your kid. Like, you've got a lot more resources available to you, whatever your kid's specific needs are going to be. Because no matter what they are, like, you can't meet all of them. Like, you can't. It's impossible.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing, is that both parents have the skill set. Like, this child chose you two out of all the parents in the world. That child's soul chose you guys for a reason, and you got learn to play off each other's strengths, and that's the huge thing. If you're not really strong with something, but your partner is, let your partner do it, whether it be mom or dad or your partner, whatever you guys call each other. Play to each other's strength. Like, there's no shame in asking your partner for help or your partner to change a diaper because you're too tired one day.
So true. Yep.
And we've been talking so much about meditations. Would you care to lead our special need mamas, or regular mamas, or special need dads, or regular dads through a meditation that would really help with, I would say, the struggle of having a normal child or having a special needs child, like something that can really help you get back to center, because that's the heart of self-care, is getting back to center, back into your heart chakra.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, this is a practice I picked up from one of my EMDR trainings. So EMDR comes from the science of Francine Shapiro, who realized essentially that rapid eye movement left and right. She was walking down a path after receiving really bad news, and she realized when she moved her eyes left and right, that something about that experience started to become less distressing to her. That was in the late 80s, and many scientific studies later, and much research later, and many innovations with this practice later, we realized, left and right movement really regulates the nervous system. I'm a fan of drumming, although I was never a drummer. Like, to me, that's probably my favorite thing of all, is just how our primal ancestors knew, like dancing left and right, or running, or all the walking that we did when we lived in the earth much more than we do now, really helped people stay healthy. So this comes from one of those trainings, and is something I like to use with women. It can be done very quickly. Once you start doing it, if your kids are watching you, they'll start mimicking what you do. So that's also pretty cool, because it's a fun thing to do. And it's based on the 4 elements. So it's based on earth, air, water, and fire. So we're going to just walk through it pretty quickly. So the first element is earth. And so what you do with the earth element is you just look around your room, your space, wherever you are, and you're going to identify 5 things in the room that you hadn't noticed before. Sometimes it's trickier if it's your house, but in my office, it was always easy for people to be like, oh, I see this sign or this picture. But so just scan the room quickly, or however long it takes you, and identify 5 things of interest to you in the room. So just do that for a few moments, just looking around. Could be on the ground, could be on the ceiling, could be next to you, and just no judgments, just like notice those things. That's the element of earth. And then we're going to work with the element of air after that, after you've done that. So with air, I like to work with alternate nostril breathing. So to do that, I'm going to just show you how. This is a yogic breath, really, especially to manage anxiety, because again, left and right parts of the body, whenever we do that, we regulate things. So when we add breathing to the situation, it does it even more, very quickly. So to do that, you simply block one side of the nostril. So I'm going to block my right side of my nostril, and I'm going to inhale left side. So inhaling left side. Once you've inhaled, you move the finger over to that other nostril, and you exhale on the opposite side. And then we stay like this, and we inhale. Move the finger to exhale. You stay with that rhythm of inhaling, and then moving the finger and exhaling opposite side. And inhale. I generally bring my eyes closed to do this, so exhaling opposite side. And just stay with your own breathing. So I like to work with this for at least 2 minutes. So we'll take one more inhale, right side. And one more exhale, left side, or whatever side you ended up on. Releasing the hands to the lap. Just if your eyes are closed, that's where I would keep them. And on your next inhale, you're going to notice which nostril is clearer, which one you're breathing through more easily. So just take a deep inhale through both nostrils now. And just take note of which nostril is predominant for you. Just some science there. Whatever nostril you're breathing through more predominantly, it means the opposite brain is most active. So for me, it was my right nostril, so I'm a little bit more in my left side of the brain. There's something to notice. We move in terms of predominance through the day. So yogically speaking, it's something to just work with in terms of which brain do I want to kind of work with, and see if you can add some alternate nostril breathing and add that into your repertoire. So you've done some alternate nostril breathing. Maybe you've noticed some shifts, maybe not. That's okay, but know that it is helping you. And then we're going to just bring eyes closed, and we're going to actually start working with the element of water now. So we're going to imagine ourselves having been in the desert for the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 days with no water available. And we've been super thirsty, and we're just looking for this like amazing glass of water to replenish ourselves. And so imagining this parched state that you are in, you're going to imagine the best possible glass of water that you could imagine. So I always put it in a really awesome glass, like a blue glass, but it might be a different color glass for you. You might have a lot of ice in this glass. You might not, if you don't like ice. But you're going to notice how the condensation of the glass, like the water in the glass, makes that like whitish color on the glass. You're going to get really vivid with this glass of water, this glass that you've been waiting to look forward to drinking for a long period of time. And you're going to notice that salivation starts to kind of increase, which is a good sign that the parasympathetic nervous system is working in your body. And now we're going to introduce a citrus fruit to the plan. So we're going to be putting a citrus fruit in this glass of water that we've designed for ourselves. So it could be a lime, it could be a lemon, it could be an orange. I've had people add cucumber to their water instead, so that's also an option. So again, just conjuring up whatever fruit, or if the cucumber is the one for you, would feel best to you to put into that water for you to take this first sip. I want you to notice again how salivation is increasing as you think about citrus fruits. Identify whichever one you want to work with. I like lime. So what you're going to do is take that fruit in front of you. You're going to witness yourself cutting that open. So you're going to see the spray. You're going to smell that smell. Notice the salivation again there. And then you're going to place that fruit in the water. And then you're going to go ahead and take that first drink in your imagination. So just noticing the settling again of the nervous system as you imagine this wonderful glass of water that you're treating yourself with, this elixir. So noticing the increased salivation there, and keeping eyes closed now, we're going to start to work with the element of fire or light. So we've done earth, we've done air, we've done water, and now we're moving on to light or fire. So now we're going to light up our imaginations and take ourselves to the most calming place you can conjure. So for me, that is always at the creek with my feet in the water. Running water and earth together are my particular favorite thing. For a lot of women, it was the beach, just the sounds and all the sensory input of the beach. For some people, it's the mountain, so being at the top of a mountain and really being able to look out. For some, it could be walking in the desert, if you've ever done that, and just seeing all of the surroundings in that setting. For some, it's a grandmother's kitchen as she's baking cookies. But it's generally somewhere that you just feel the most you, the most connected to something bigger than just you, a very calm and serene setting for yourself. So I want you to just bring that up as vividly as possible in your imagination. And the viewer is going to need to kind of open their eyes and hold on to that. And I'm going to show you an EMDR thing called butterfly hug, really good for kids, good for adults too. So to do that, we cross arms over chest, place hands on shoulders. And so what we're going to do is work with some alternate bilateral tapping as we think of this beautiful, wonderful, relaxing, serene place. So you can bring eyes closed once you get the feel of it, but we're going to be going alternate tapping left and right, left and right. So we're just giving ourselves a nice tap And once you feel like you've got a rhythm going that feels good in your body, generally not too crazy fast, but not too slow, so somewhere medium-ish. I always bring my eyes closed to best kind of accentuate that setting wherever it is that you've identified. So again, for me, it's feet in the creek, hearing the noise of the babbling brook, hearing the trees, hearing the wind through the trees, watching the sun sparkle on the water. For you, it might be some other setting, but just kind of sitting for a moment, lightly tapping yourself, noticing that after a little self-drumming, we all of a sudden probably spontaneously need to take a nice deep breath. So if you haven't already, just taking a nice deep breath in through the nostrils. And the trick here and the science here being the exhale should be a bit longer than that inhale by at least 2 counts. So just remembering that ratio of inhale for 4, maybe exhaling for 6, or inhaling 6, exhaling 8, whatever it is in your body, your lung capacity. But this left and right magic really does help bring the nervous system back to a better, healthier place. So just stay with that for a few more moments, that beautiful setting that you've identified, wherever it might be. Take yourself there as much as you're able to. Notice what you're hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, sensing there. And we'll take one more inhale here, and a nice long exhale out. You can go ahead and release hands, palms up on knees. Notice how the body feels. Take a scan from the top of your head, down the neck, the shoulders. See if you can release some tension in the jaw. You hold a ton of tension there. Keep the scan going down through the abdomen, pelvic region, the legs, the knees, down to the ankles and the toes. Consideration for something random like the toe next to the pinky toe. It's not somewhere we check in with, but check in with that spot. And just a nice loving body scan as you stay maybe in that beautiful serene setting that you've identified. And when you're ready to come out of that place, we're going to go back to that element of earth and those 5 objects in the room that you started with. So we're bringing ourselves back to the room before we open our eyes. So just thinking about where in the physical room you identified those 5 different things. And before you open your eyes, just having a sense of the room that surrounds you. And when you're ready, going ahead and opening the eyes. See what you notice. Deep breath one last time. And I think that took us, 5 minutes, 7 minutes max. You could shorten it for yourself, but it's easy to get into because it's earth element, 5 things in your room. Air element, alternate nostril breathing, or just breathing. If you don't remember alternate nostril breathing, just air is like inhale and longer exhale. Long exhale is most important. We've got water. Imagine that like thirst quenching glass of water. We need a lot of imagination for these things. And then light, using that butterfly hug, tapping left and right, and thinking of that really awesome place, nature scene, usually for me anyway, nature scenes are what do it for me. And giving yourself a little bilateral love, basically. Mm-hmm. And that is the 4 elements.
All right, thank you so much, Suzanne. Before we went on recording, you told me about a group for moms that you just started, because I'm sure a lot of people watching this video are intrigued by your practice and probably want to know more. And the best way to do that is going into a community, which you have started. Can you tell us, before I let you go, a bit about that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yes. I created Mama Sori because I realized that I don't think this COVID thing's ending anytime soon. And I feel like I will be doing some form of education of my 3 children in the next school year, if not the whole school year. So with that realization was, I got to take this pretty seriously, because like I am educating my children. I had never really, I mean, school was great. Like I sent them there, they did their thing. I wasn't informed on their curriculum, like what exactly they were learning. They went, they brought home stuff and they did their thing, and it was great. So I've really gotten a really good understanding now of their curriculum, what they are actually learning, and how much I really feel like I need to supplement with what I think is important for them to be learning. So if we embrace this experience of this COVID experience, at least if you've got school age kids like I do, and also toddlers too, what do you want to be teaching them? What uniquely in this experience of lockdown and being really in close contact with them a lot of the time, what is going to shift their legacy into becoming the human beings that are hopefully going to continue the changes that need to be happening in our culture? We're in a very revolutionary, culture unraveling time for a reason. There's a lot of crap that needs to be shifted and changed, and our children are the ones that are hopefully going to be enabled to do that. So that's where the idea came from for Mama Sori. I feel like the mamas really need to help the kids, and with Montessori, the idea being your child will direct its own learning based on what it is he or she is interested in, not it. So how do you support that as a mom? And even still then also deal with the school system that you're dealing with and all of that. So I needed a community. That's why I created it. And so we've had this group now a couple times. We run it on the new moon, or the Friday closest to the new moon. I really like the new moon energy in terms of just a chance for rebirthing for the next month. So we had our first new moon on like last Friday, which was the new moon, Cancer new moon, which is the mother's moon actually, which is interesting. So the plan being, it's a 2-hour group that we have the Fridays before the new moon. And it's going to become a membership. So what's going to happen is we're going to have this 2-hour group every month as a support system for all of the moms that join up. But then also we will have an online community to continue to be in contact. Like, hey, I found this really cool resource, or I tried this science activity with my kid and it was really cool. We made Play-Doh and it was successful, or it was horrible, or, you know, any of those kinds of resource sharing is what the online platform is supposed to be. So a similar thing to a Facebook group, but not Facebook, because I'm not a huge fan of Facebook in general. So kind of wanted something separate. So that is what's being created. The next new moon, I believe, is July 17th-ish, somewhere in there. But everything can be found on my website. I'm working on the tech aspect of updating it here in the next few weeks. I have someone helping me with the website part and the platform part, which is great. But each group has a support part of it in the beginning of the group, and then the second hour of the group is we've got an astrologer that comes in and really talks through, hey, this new moon, this is the energy that's going on. She talked about the eclipses coming up, and just like all of the astrological stuff that is going on, and just a consideration of the impact we receive from just where the stars and the planets are aligned. Again, it's something I'm still diving into, so I don't feel like I can be the person to really communicate it as well as the woman that I've brought, the mom that I've brought in. She's been a mother. She has kiddos that are in their 30s now, so she's been doing this for a while. And I think, again, in terms of mentoring and motherhood, having, again, someone that's even 5, 10, 15, and 20 years ahead of you, like, oh yeah, like these things pass and something else happens. So yeah, so that, and then we do talk a lot about the Enneagram, which is another of my passions, which is just a whole nother conversation for sure, an infinite conversation of how to understand human beings in a very compassionate way and not a diagnosis way, because I am done with the DSM. So that's the Mama Sori. Support for moms, specifically around, you know, just the struggles of parenting right now, and also how to work with the natural rhythms of the moon cycle, nature cycle, season cycles. All of that is also of great interest to me. So it's kind of a mashup of all of those things. So it will be, it's like $15 a month to join. And again, like the technology side of it is coming. I'm working on it. But it should be up and running by July. So that's the plan anyway.
Well, before all that's up, how can people get in contact with you now? They want to book a session or join this mama group?
Sure. Yeah, so I work much more as a coach and a consultant than I do as a traditional psychotherapist. I have a whole manifest manifesto of the non-psychotherapist on my website for a reason. I am very much parting with the healthcare traditional ways of being for a lot of reasons, which I would love to, communicate, but it's on my website. That being said, I certainly talk to people for free, like in terms of like, you want to understand how I'm working with people, or where should I enter into if you wanted to work one-on-one with me versus if you wanted to be in the Mama Sori, that's going to be pretty easy to join. So there's lots of options there. So it's on the website. Email, phone is fine. Like I said, certainly willing to talk anyone through kind of my non-traditional approach to working with women, with a belief system that you shouldn't be working with me for the next forever. It should be a short-term investment, and then go live your life, because you are the expert of your life, not me by any means. So yeah, so reach out. However, I am on the Instagrams. I wasn't before this business owning thing, so I post mostly there, at Science and Souls, SOULZ. So that is also another spot you can find me too. So, and Facebook, I guess. I have a business page on there too.
All right, awesome, Suzanne. I'll leave you with one more question. What does inclusion mean to you?
Sure. Oh, for me, it's always inclusion of self first, because I tend to rage against myself more than anyone else, just because of my Enneagram type, which is a 4, if you know it, if you know the work, and a 5 too. So I always think about first how to not rage against myself, especially as a parent, because we always think we're doing something wrong, or we're missing something. At least I do. So I start there. And for me, it is really like supporting those that are the most denigrated by society, which is why I think I've always been drawn to working with folks who've gone through trauma, because they hold so much knowledge about the world in the descents that they have taken into whatever they have experienced, whether it is, having a child with needs that they didn't expect, or whether it's, stuff they've gone through in childhood, or stuff that they've been given by their family of origin. Those are the people I always gravitate towards next, because to me, they're the most interesting, and I learn so much from them. So that's just always how I've rolled. And yeah, just self, and then know yourself, know your ancestors, and then know your soul, because you can be adaptive. And when you are adaptive, you are able to be more adaptive with whoever you're supposed to be helping. The genius of us all is usually in the wounding, right? So when we can make sense of the wounding, and then it becomes our power, like, to me, that's like inclusion, because that's what we are all here to do, is to access that. And so there's just interesting ways you can do that scientifically, and then soul-wise too. So yeah, that's what inclusion means to me anyway.
All right, awesome. Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on Inclusion Tube. We hope to have you again someday. Folks, it's been another episode of Inclusion Tube. Today's guest is Suzanne Fisher, a brilliant therapist, or whatever title she wants to give herself.
A non-psycho therapist, yes.
Non-psychotherapist.
A non-psycho therapist.
Please subscribe to the channel below. Please contact Suzanne if what she's doing really intrigues you. This has been Sam Huber on Inclusion Tube, signing off.